What's up? This is Patrick Hayes, and in this video I'm going to talk about making the discernment between the dark side and false light, or what Rudolf Steiner would call Harmonic and Luciferic. So for anyone that watched my last video that was on New Age Luciferianism, essentially what I'm going to do is I'm going to go deeper into the differentiation between the dark side or Harmonic energy versus the Luciferic energy that I was talking about in the other video. So this will add some more clarity as to how to identify these energies and what ultimately the beings that are behind these energies in our everyday life and in society and in the world. And I think this is really important because this is actually a very powerful navigation tool for how to keep ourselves on the central path, the Christic path, which is in balance, that and it actually leads to the evolution of the soul, whereas getting caught too far into one of these sides is actually moving off of our evolutionary path. So one of the things why this is really important is because there needs to be at least, and Steiner said this, there needs to be at least a minimum 3-part discernment capacity for human beings dealing with these different spiritual entities. And what happened through the church and through different reductionist teachings earlier on in history is that everything got reduced to dark and light. So it was reduced to, God is light and then there's darkness in this polarized kind of system. But ultimately what that does is that leaves us very vulnerable to confusion and misinterpretation and deception. So bringing back a minimum 3-part system for being able to discern where we're going is really, really important. So that's what I want to talk about here. So again, we have what I'm calling the dark side, just because I feel like it's more appropriate in our language today than Harmonic. But for people that are Steiner followers, Harmonic is what I'm talking about when I say the dark side. And I'm saying false light, which is Luciferic, right? And then it says Steiner would call it Luciferic, but I'm calling it false light. So I'm going to use those terms interchangeably. But I just want to give some examples of the two different poles, because they are different poles, right? They're the pole of power and mercy. So if you're looking at the Sephiroth and you're looking at the tree of life, we have the central path, which is the Christic path, right? And then we have the path of power and the path of mercy, right? So Luciferic's like on the path of mercy and Harmonic's on the path of power. But essentially Harmonic, you could describe it as being, and this is the dark side, you could describe it as being power that corrupts. And on the mercy side, or the Luciferic side, you can think of it as wisdom that corrupts, right? And both power and wisdom need to be alchemized by love in order to reach its culmination of alchemy, right? So power is something that we need to learn how to alchemize with love in order to embody power in a Christic way, in the same way that wisdom needs to be alchemized with love in order to embody wisdom in a Christic way. So some examples of dark side versus false light side is dark side is very much connected to materialism, right? So it's scientism. And when I use the term scientism, for anyone that's not familiar with that, that's materialist science that is basically being exercised and used like a religion and understood and devoted to like a religion. So over materialistic science. And this is something that actually is a big part of what is called the Harmonic Deception, which is a large deception that's going on in consciousness right now that is making people over-materialized in the way that they think, which makes them vulnerable to a lot of deception. And I'm going to go a lot deeper into that in other videos where I'm going to talk about, throughout history how this has been implemented. But materialism is very much connected to the dark side, as we're calling it here. Now the flip side of that is, on the false light side, is illusory spirituality. So we have materialism, right? And then we have illusory spirituality, which is also connected to like idol cults, where people, false light gurus are being worshipped, and the self-aggrandizement and selfish connections to spirituality, right? So we have materialism and we have illusory spirituality or false light. Then we have another example is on this dark side, a lot of the intention of the Harmonic beings is tried to convince humanity that spirits don't exist, that spirituality doesn't exist. But these beings will work on two different levels. So if somebody is prone to materialism, they will have them continuing to believe that spirit doesn't exist, soul doesn't exist, and it's just the material world. You can see this in a lot of modern scientific paradigms today. But if a soul is more advanced and a soul is aware of the spiritual realm, then these beings will kind of switch their story and try to influence these people to get into the perspective of, okay, well, I'm one of the smart ones that understands that spirits exist, so now I use it to become a black magician and to manipulate people, right? So this is very much how these beings will work. Now, on the other side of it, the Luciferic beings oftentimes will have a very strong influence on people towards the ungrounded perspective of material world being an illusion, right? So one is like the spiritual world's an illusion, right? And then the other is like material is an illusion. And while there are a lot of illusory aspects to the material world, and there's a lot to explore in this whole thing. While there are a lot of illusory aspects in the material world, there is a very real alchemical process that's going on through the incarnation process, and matter and physical reality, it does have an important and significant reality to it, right? So a lot of these notions is that nothing matters in the physical world and it's all an illusion. This is a Luciferic influence, and it's intended to bring people off of their evolutionary path. Some other examples. This dark side, this harmonic force, right? This is over meticulous. This is controlling energy. This is, I want to tag and label everything, and being a control freak over stuff. You see this with, this is also connected to technology. You can see this with big tech today. They're tracking everything, right? Very harmonic. In fact, technology, for the most part as we know it, was inspired by these dark side beings, these harmonic beings. And there's a whole agenda behind it. Like I said, I'm going to get into videos on that when I'm talking about harmonic deception. The other side to that, right, the false light side, is negligence, right? So it's not so much tagging and categorizing everything. It's more like, oh, I'm just not even really paying attention to anything at all. I'm quite negligent, right? So you can see this. There's this power and control aspect that's really strong in this on the dark side. When on the false light side is very much more like a carelessness or a seeking of endless pleasure, an aloofness, a lack of responsibility for your material responsibilities, right? Some examples of the dark side are the military industrial complex. That's like iconic dark side harmonic energy, right? Big tech in its diabolical expressions is absolutely harmonic in nature. The other side of that, the Hollywood or the New Age, is very much Luciferic. It's very much false light. Hollywood, New Age, guru complex kind of thing. So power addicts, people that are chasing after power, this is very much dark side harmonic. Drug addicts, people chasing after pleasure, this is very much Luciferic, right, or false light. So the dark side it's almost like the dark side wants to torture you. It wants to torture people. The false light side will abandon others. It will disconnect and avoid responsibility. Well, a great archetype for human beings, archetypes to look at, is dark side archetype is materialistic businessman. So science is all that exists. I'm super materialistic. I'm just about making money. Materialistic businessman. This is like the lower level consciousness of the harmonic side when an individual is influenced by harmonic beings. The higher level consciousness influenced by harmonic beings of humans would be the dark sorcerer, right? Still that desire for control and power and torture that's brought into a spiritual realm to a certain degree, but the dark sorcerer. And on the other side of it, on the false light, it is ungrounded hippie, right? Somebody that can't take responsibility for their life, or a drug addict, right? And then on maybe the higher consciousness version of that side, it would be the self-aggrandized guru. So you can see, so now as I'm breaking this down, you can kind of see. I mean, these are very clear archetypes, and we can see these energies playing out in the world. A couple more examples: war, cutthroat corporations, the technocratic society. This is all harmonic. This is all dark side. The notions that the aliens are going to come save us. that we don't need to do anything and we're just going to be taken care of and we don't need to take responsibility. This is very much false light side. Let me come and inject you with nanobots. That's very much an harmonic dark side energy intention. All is an illusion, man. It's all going to be good. Just remain passive and everything's going to work out. That is very much a false light issue. So when we're talking about the idea of cyborgism, transhumanism, this is part of the harmonic agenda, right? And again, we're gonna go deeper into this in the future as I move forward. But the idea of extracting soul from physicality to the point that consciousness is looked at like a machine, in a sense, like a biological machine, and that there isn't soul or there isn't spirit, and trapping people into a artificial kind of intelligence consciousness where we're connected to computers. This is our harmonic agenda, and this is an agenda being rolled out by dark beings, spiritual beings. These are spiritual beings. They're spiritual beings that are responsible for creating much of the physical world. So they're because these are forces that are, again, they're connected to all that is. So in that sense, they're connected to God. But these forces are corrupted by carnal desires. Now, on the other side of that is this idea of disconnecting from earthly life and dissolving back into oneness. Now, there's a lot of this that is taught in varying degrees of corruption, and even in some pure ways in a lot of Eastern traditions. But it gets corrupted oftentimes by some of these false light beings when it's taught in a way that is basically convincing people to abandon the alchemical process of incarnation that we're going through. There's a reason why we're incarnating into the physical. We incarnate into the physical in order to alchemize ourselves and our own I am individuality, and spiritualize our consciousness from a individual sense, so that we can then re-enter as higher beings and higher individualized beings into the spirit realm. This doesn't mean, when I say individualized beings, this doesn't mean we're not connected to the one, or that we don't have the capacity to experience oneness. But it does offer the ability to experience a paradox of both oneness but individuality at the same time. And this is an alchemical evolution that is behind the purpose for why we're incarnating. But there are Luciferic programs that have weaved their way into different religious teachings and spiritual teachings that champion the idea of extracting yourself from this alchemical process of incarnation and going through the subsequent incarnations to actually evolve to that higher level of becoming, an individualized, spiritualized being. And it focuses on influencing people to abandon the incarnation process altogether, to get off the wheel of incarnation and actually just dissolve back into oneness without having gone through the full alchemical process that incarnation is here to give us. So this idea of, let me just shift out of this dimension and go back to oneness, or let me shift timelines to a dimension in which humanity is, where I don't have to deal with this evolution that humanity is going through and all the trials that we're going through. That is actually stepping out of your evolutionary path of going through the subsequent incarnations and actually going through the trials and going through the suffering that's necessary in order for us to rise to a higher level. A lot of the notions taught in a lot of this New Age spiritual content that are very much wrapped up in this idea of shift yourself into a space where you have endless pleasure experience, where you're on this endless bliss experience kind of path and everything is just permanently blissful. This is an escapist Luciferic influence, a false light influence, and it plays upon our desires for having beautiful, uplifting experiences. Now, this doesn't mean that uplifting and beautiful experiences aren't part of the path and aren't very valuable and aren't actually good things. But there can be an unhealthy relationship to it in which we avoid the challenges that are necessary for our own evolution in order to try to escape into an endless ecstatic experience of spirituality. Okay, so with all that said, essentially I'm setting the stage to be able to go deeper into these things, and so that when I start speaking about false light or the dark side or false light, that you can follow me and have references, and then start to actually in your everyday life, when you see different things, be able to understand this framework, because it's really valuable framework. And it's always also very valuable because it gives you the capacity, when you find yourself coming out of alignment, you're basically going to be falling out of alignment into one of two ways, either into avoidance or into over attachment. You could say almost in a sense like that. Or you could be basically becoming too materialistic in the way that you're dealing with things, or trying to control stuff too much, right? Or too aloof and too irresponsible, right? And so it's important for us to find that central path, because it's actually these different forces. Again, like I said in the last video I made, it's not that these forces in and of themselves are negative forces, right? But they can be taken to an extreme in which it's unhealthy. So our job is to harmonize these two different energies into a balance, and then actually through these forces harmonized into a balance, this is what propels us up the central path on the tree of life, or up the Christic path of our own evolution. So it's really, once you start using this as a navigation tool, you'll see how powerful it is and how clearly things reveal themselves to you, as far as which direction they're more influenced by. Because remember, this is not just, I'm talking about these as forces, and they are forces, but these are not just forces, these are beings, right? It can be thought of as Ahriman as a being and Lucifer as a being, and then all the different beings that are, say, part of that camp that are interacting with humans and our consciousness on a regular basis. These levels of consciousness, these different beings interact with our thoughts and with our emotions and our will impulses. And so it's really important for us to start understanding and being able to identify when we feel a certain energy that is coming from an harmonic source or coming from a luciferic source. And so when you can start identifying them out in the world, you can start feeling the energy. You can feel the energy in certain expressions. You can feel it in certain institutions. You can feel it in different people. And you start being able to make the discernment between dark side, light side, and the Christic center. Right? And the Christic center is a purer light. This is a more divine light. It's a purer light, and it is impregnated with selfless love. And this is really what, like I said, it brings wisdom and it brings power, and it alchemizes that with selfless love in a way that aligns it with our true evolutionary path. Right? So being able to discern these three different forms of energy really is a tremendous tool for navigating in these crazy times today. So with that all said, thank you so much for tuning in, and there's a lot more to come. Like I said in the last video, unpacking this is tremendous. And I don't know, this might be 30, 50 videos that I need to make to unpack this primary message that I'm trying to get across. But if you haven't already joined my Telegram page, you can go ahead to @PatrickHaize, H-A-I-Z-E, live, capital P, capital H, capital L, @PatrickHaize live on Telegram. And if you want to donate to me, there is a link that I'm putting in here to a checkout page where you can donate. I'll also put my link up to Venmo here if you want to donate there. All donations are really, really appreciated. Thanks so much for tuning in. It was awesome to share this with you, and I look forward to the next video that I get to share. All right, bye-bye.